Coach Ara here. Today I want to talk about um the importance of the oxygen consumption and VO2 max in exercise physiology. So, what we will learn in this presentation, it's going to be mostly focusing on the importance and significance roles of the calorimetry. In exercise science, it is essential to know the quantifying or measuring the amount of the energy expended during a single session of an exercise. Uh, Now, we're not going on the details of the time-wise, but you want to know how to measure that. Um, this is useful for many reasons. First, it is determining the energy cost for a wide range of physical activities. Caloric expenditure for weight control, and type of fuel or substrate being used by the muscle during an exercise. The technique of calorimetry is used to measure energy expenditure during exercise. Okay? Calorimetry is defined as measurement of heat production, usually measured in unit of calories. As all metabolic processes ultimately result in heat production, such as skeletal muscle during a contraction, we can estimate an individual's metabolic rate by measuring the rate of heat production. The actual measurement of heat production by the body is termed direct calorimetry and can be used to estimate one's metabolic rate both at rest and during exercise. Okay? And as you see here in this small picture where the metabolism starts with the calorimetry, if it's direct, how that measurement happens. Here's an example of a human calorimetry chamber. Okay, um, where these type of with these type of chambers, the major problem is they're very expensive. So the heat produced by the body during the exercise can be monitored by various thermal detection devices inside this chamber. As I mentioned, these chambers are extremely expensive and thus are not very practical for clinicians, healthcare providers, personal trainers, coaches, and researchers alike. Um, On the other hand, we have indirect calorimetry is by far the most common method for estimating one's metabolic rate, especially by measurement of oxygen consumption. So, which that's what we're going to talk about, where we are consuming O2 and where CO2 coming in, and then where the nitrogen balance is, and all those details. So it is based on the observation that the oxygen consumed by the body for energy production when your muscles are working. A direct relationship exists between the amount of the oxygen consumed and the amount of the heat that produced. So by measuring the rate of the oxygen consumption, the indirect calorimetry, we can get a very good estimate on individuals' metabolic rate. And as you see here, basically you have your nutrition consumed by O2, then you produce, you're taking the O2, you're inhaling O2, you have your nutrition already in, then you're producing heat, carbon dioxide, and H2O or water. All right. The rate of oxygen consumption is indicated by VO2. The V over here indicates the volume of oxygen, and the dot over the V implies a rate, which in this case is milliliters of oxygen. and basically is the milliliter of the oxygen consumed for a minute. And which you can kind of see in these two pictures or diagrams, that differences in VO2 between trained and untrained subject that it shows. So how that's going to be different, and then how an athlete or someone that is training is breathing and or basically or utilizing that VO2 compared to non-athlete. And if we want to go a little bit details on these two pictures, you can notice the significant increase of oxygen consumption when we go from a resting state to a steady state, okay, from the rest to the steady state of maximal exercise and giving intensity. This is here represents the indirect calorimetry, an increase in your metabolic rate compared to rest. In order to measure an individual's maximal oxygen consumption, which is obviously it's a really a gold standard for assessing one's cardiovascular fitness. Your athlete, the individual, whoever you have, must complete a graded exercise test all the way down to exhaustion. This is generally done either on a treadmill or a bicycle, you can even design protocols with the kettlebell, or even outdoor running, or row machines. So you can all design that, but usually as of standard, it's better to be done either by treadmill or by a bike. This test begins at a very easy workload, and afterwards the intensity is gradually increased every 2 to 3 minutes until the individual fatigues and cannot continue the workout. As an example, think about it this way. So I'm just sharing the way that the PNOE metabolic analyzer is working. By the way, that picture on the previous slides, which you can see here, this is the PNOE metabolic analyzer here, with which this atlas is using for the measurement on these ski rows, or any type of row machines. So, which the cool part of the PNOE is it's portable, so you can literally go anywhere, walk around with it, and you can run outdoor, and that makes it a little bit like different from other devices out there, and their measurement is very accurate. Okay, but back to our main topic as of the measuring our metabolic rate. So the way that it works is, there it is. So the way that it works is basically you start with the very mild, slow load, and that again depends on is your individual trained or not trained, or how hard you can push your individual. Therefore, you're going to have different protocols. Under the PNOE's application and protocols, they have 3 categories as of easy, medium, and hard. And each of them has a different intensity for your running. But let's consider if you're putting on the medium. So you start with that first 3-4 minutes with a speed of 3 or 4, and then the next 3-4 minutes you go on a speed of 6, and then the next 3 minutes you go on a speed of a 7, and then on the last 2 minutes you go a speed of 8, 9, and then adding a little bit of elevation. So the athlete's going to run as fast on that 2 minutes, and that's it. After that, it's a fatigue. And that's exactly what I mentioned. The intensity gradually increase every 2 to 3 minutes until your athlete or your student fatigues and cannot continue. Oxygen consumption is measured at the end of each stage and plotted, and it's kind of plotted against workload. And that's where the PNOE captures that all automatically. And as can you see here, the oxygen consumption increases by increasing the grade, indicating basically by each grade it goes more. So if we look at this picture based on we talked about, so every step that the run happens, the oxygen consumption goes up. Till on the grade 6, it's basically where these athletes is gonna give up. All right. So if you notice, from the grade 5 to grade 6, okay, the oxygen consumption does not really increase or really change, despite the increase in the workload, because from the grade 5 to grade 6, the speed is changed. Maybe you add a little bit of like maybe you add the extra speed over there and add a little bit of an elevation on your treadmill. So workload is increased, but the oxygen consumption stays the same. That's where the individual has reached his or her maximum rate of oxygen consumption, or VO2 max. Okay, and as you shown here, VO2 increases linearly with increasing workload until VO2 max is achieved. A hallmark training adaptation associated with regular endurance training is an increase in one's VO2 max. So this is the part, like you really don't want to push your athlete or push your client on that area more than that, at least for in the test area. Okay. The reason for this increase relates to the improvement in the oxygen delivery. Therefore, you have the cardiovascular adaptation as well as improvements in muscle mitochondrial oxygen utilization. So this type of training or this type of kind of a test, or if you can come up with the protocols that kind of a slowly, step by step, you're having more oxygen consumption, whether it's come a specific work to rest ratio, that will help you to increase your cardiovascular system and increase the health of your mitochondria. Now, endurance or aerobic activities that recruit a large muscle mass over an extended period of time generally produce athletes with the highest volumes or values for the VO2 max, as such as cross-country skiers, distant runners, typically have the highest reported VO2s. So, and as you see here, like on the sport benchmarks, like it's 69 to 95, it's a 65 to 80, and that's how basically the measurement that they did. So these two type of athletes, they have the highest. Now, there's one important part that is basically most important part of all these numbers and all these measurements, and it's the VCO2 and the VO2 ratio. So if when we inhale, and here I'm gonna go back and forth. Actually, I'm gonna wait till we get to that part, but I will show you with the more diagrams that how this when we start our workout on the different intensities, how this O2 and CO2 or VO2 or VCO2 are working with each other. But anyway, hear me on this area as RER, or your respiratory exchange ratio, is simply the volume of the carbon dioxide produced divided by the volume of the oxygen consumed. This ratio is very useful as it provides valuable information on type of fuel or substrate being used by the muscles during exercise. If I want to add a little bit extra in this area, is in addition to basically measuring oxygen consumption, because the carbon dioxide is going to have a role over there. So we need to measure the amount of the volume of the carbon dioxide as well. So that's where basically the RER, it comes in through that measurement. And this knowledge is it's a very valuable outcome for the oxygen consumption, because it's led us as trainers, coaches, health professionals to know the number of the RER. And as you see here, it gives you kind of the percentage of the fat and carbohydrate that you're using as a source of energy during your workout. And I will go a little bit more details about these numbers in a bit, so just bear with me. But basically, by having the respiratory exchange ratio, we can kind of know about the caloric percentage of the fat and carbohydrate being used during our exercise. So, but to not leave you empty on this table, think about it. If you're burning pure fat, your respiratory exchange ratio will be 0.7. If you're burning pure carbohydrate, your respiratory exchange ratio will be 1. And again, these are the valuable information, because based on this information, you can come up with a great nutrition plan for your athletes and for your students and for your clientele, as of what they need to eat, which type of food they need, basically, when they are when they're working out or getting ready for any type of activity. Now, here's a commonly used fat. Okay, so now let's a little bit open up how those numbers works and where or how we can get to those numbers. However, you don't need to know this measurement. The cool part of those, like those chambers or like a Pinoy analyzer, is they all do this calculation for you. So it's just good to know how the calculation happens. So now I'm just kind of explaining with a just simple example. All right. So the commonly used fat, it's a 16 carbon-free fatty acids palmitate used by muscle during exercise for fuel. All right. Notice that the respiratory exchange ratio for its complete oxidation to carbon dioxide and water is 0.7. With the complete oxidation of glucose, the primary carbohydrate used by muscle during the exercise, the respiratory exchange ratio is 1. Okay? By having this information, again, researchers can determine that carbohydrates are used to a greater extent than fats for sprinting and high power activities, while the use of fat is preferred for distance athletes. Okay? But as you see here, with the 16 CO2 and then 23 O2, that's where these numbers come from, okay? And that's completely changed when your source of energy is glucose. And now I have a pop quiz for you guys, but before we get to that pop quiz, and these numbers, again, it's really valuable numbers when you start using the Pinoy and go a little bit on the back end of the application, which I'm going to show you in a second after your pop quiz. It's really going to help you to understand how you need to even program, because that's where the heart rate concept is going to come out. Because by knowing where and how, by knowing when and how these fuels works, you can know on what intensity to use which one. And therefore, if you're using a heart rate monitor, that's going to give you a better understanding of what zone you have to stay if you want to use more fat as a source of energy, or if you want to use more, basically, glucose or carbohydrate as a source of energy. Now here's your quiz. Regarding the respiratory exchange ratio, which statement is true? I give you 30 seconds and I give you the answer as well. All right? Yes, the answer is D. It gives an indication as to what type of fuel is being used. The respiratory exchange ratio for fats is 0.7 and 1 for carbohydrate. Thus, this measurement gives an indication of the type of fuel being used for energy production. Now, going back to here, this is what you get on the Panoe metabolic analyzer. Now, whatever we talked about, we're going to put it on the action. We're going to put it on the work. Okay? This blue line over here, it's your VO2, and then the red line over here, it's VCO2. The whole concept is that you want to know how much oxygen you take in, and the measurement is all about the percentage of the oxygen and CO2 you're taking in. Okay? Generally, it's around 21% of oxygen that goes in, and 2% CO2 goes in. The rest is not nitrogen. However, these numbers are changing in different altitudes, so it's not a, like really like absolute numbers as of they can stay. But that's basically how those numbers works. Now, if you can measure what goes in and you can measure what comes out, the differences between what goes in and what comes out is your O2 consumption and your CO2 production. And that's what these measurements all come in. And as you can see in the picture, that over here, or in this diagram, that O2 or VO2 is kind of they're both starting in the same level going in, and how that it's gonna change during the time. They're almost the same. When you're starting, they're really almost the same as a baseline. And again, by moving forward and adding a little more stress and a little bit intensity, and you will see how the O2 and CO2 are going up and down. And then remember, CO2 carries both aerobic and anaerobic components. Okay, that's one thing you want to write down. CO2 carries both aerobic and anaerobic components. And think about it this way: when you exercise more and you start breathing heavier, most of the time you think you need more oxygen, where you have more than enough O2. Okay, you have more than enough oxygen. But it is byproduct of the metabolism of both aerobic and anaerobic, but mostly anaerobic, okay, because we produce more CO2. So when you hold your breath and you think you're running out of oxygen and you're getting to the point to breathe again, that doesn't come from that you don't have enough oxygen. It's because you start producing more CO2. And that's what drives you to breathe more. It is hardly ever you ran out of the oxygen. Remember that, because you have a big buffer in your myoglobin and hemoglobin as well. So you hardly go out of oxygen, but you produce CO2. That's why you need to breathe. That's why you can't hold your breath. And then that's where you let your brain, lungs, and arteries know that I need to breathe. And that is what we call like acidic environment. And what you see here, it is all about those indirect calorimetry measurements that we talk about. We use this proxy measure to see when oxygen consumption is going up, more active muscle is taking place, and you start producing CO2, as well as in a second circle of oxygen, like when you come kind of like coming over here you see like the oxygen consumption slowly goes up, like your bout of exercise, you're now starting working out. So this is like kind of a beginning of your workout, and then you're going up, you start consuming more oxygen, and all of a sudden you will see that in these areas the CO2 comes in, and then basically how on that area works. Now, if you remember, we talked about the RER, how the VCO2 over the VO2 creates the RER, and this is where the RER comes in. And then if you remember that number 7 that we talked about, it's going to be a little bit hard here to kind of find that 0.7. But again, this is another cool part of the PNOE that you can kind of follow up where everything's happened. So wherever you see that, if I go back one more time to my slides and bring this table, you guys see these numbers, like all the 0.777 all the way down to 1. All this area where this numbers is like 0.7, 4, and come all the way up to 7, 9, 8. These are the area that I'm using fat as a source of energy. Okay? And then from there, when I'm reaching to 1, that's where I'm kind of switching to carbohydrate. And by more going up over here, the number is always going to stay on a 1. This is where it is completely relying on carbohydrate as a source of energy. And again, this is another cool part of the PNOE, that it even tells you the total calories that you burn compared to fat. Okay? And that's another valuable information you can see here, that how this works. And as you see here, like, and then this is, by the way, based on the time as of the seconds. So the 600 seconds, basically, this is the like a first 10 minutes of your workout. And as you see here, I can measure on my first 10 minutes of the workout, somewhere around here, I'm almost burning 8 calories per minute. If I come over here, like, probably it will be more accurate as of. Sorry, over here. As you can see here, based on this protocol that I did, every minute I'm burning around 15 calories. Okay, and the only problem is, if you think about that, you can hold on this area. So you see here, this is the top part of it that I could burn 24 minutes. The thing is, you can't hold there for like 10 minutes. Like if you think, oh, if I want to burn 240 calories, I just need to stay on this area for 10 minutes. That's never going to happen. So for 1 minute maybe, and that's where this number comes. For 1 minute maybe, that's where this 15 comes. But it's going to be hard to hold on this area, or on this top peak of it, 24 calories, for 10 minutes. That's why you always go up and down on your areas. And then, as you see again, all these areas at the beginning where the number over here was, where is that 7? If we can find. Somewhere here, that 7, that we're still using mostly fat as our source of energy. Okay? This is probably, again, some recovery time, slowed down. And as you see here, over here, it's completely more on a carbohydrate. Remember, it's not that you're never going to use the fat as a source of energy, but you're automatically shifting your calorie base more towards the carbohydrate. However, this is mostly, here is a total calorie, but you see there is no fat up over here. So the fat is all down here. So that shows it's completely, we're relying on a carbohydrate over here. And again, here they still have another good way to demonstrate this, which we already talked about. The yellow part is where you're using fat completely, which over here, as of the steady state of it, it's a slow pace. It's very slow. Maybe you're just, that's why like a distance runner, a slow pace, and then slowly I'm switching to carbohydrate, and as you see, where my heart rate is slowly going up, and I'm still here mostly using carbohydrate. And again, these are the valuable information that I can see when my heart rate is around 172, I'm completely targeting carbohydrate to burn. So therefore, if I'm using a heart rate monitor, I can see where should I keep my heart rate to burn more calories, to use more carbohydrate, to burn more carbohydrate, and burn more calories. So if I can intensively stay on that 172 heart rate zone, that means I can use more carbohydrate, I can burn more calories. So this is overall of the topic of the VO2 and VO2 max. I know it's a little bit short as of I want to go more details about these charts and stuff, but because they give you a lot of good details. But check out the PNOE breathing analyzer, PNOE, and they have this is their company, and if you go to their website, they have a lot of information here. And again, the cool part of the PNOE metabolic analyzer is this information here, and they'll tell you how you can do it. And now they have their new protocols for the home-based training and everything. Great company, great support, and I highly recommend check them out. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and if you have any question, I post a ton of informational content about kettlebell training, sandbag training, and how you can use all this information and turn it more science-based and more sustainable workout. All right, I hope you enjoyed. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and ciao.